What if I told you that one man in one airplane destroyed an entire army? That a single pilot turned the tide of World War II with nothing but outdated bombs and unbreakable determination? This is the story of the most incredible solo mission in aviation history. His name was Hans-Ulrich Rudel. Hans-Ulrich Rudel. A Stuka dive bomber pilot who flew 2,530 combat missions, more than any pilot in history. But this isn't just about numbers. This is about the day Rudel single-handedly stopped a Soviet tank army that was 48 hours away from capturing Berlin and ending World War II. This is the story of Operation Bagration's darkest moment, when one German pilot with an obsolete airplane achieved what entire panzer divisions couldn't accomplish. How skill, courage, and absolute refusal to surrender can change the course of history in ways that seem impossible to believe. June 23, 1944. Operation Bagration explodes across the Eastern Front like a steel hurricane. 2 million Soviet soldiers, 4,000 tanks, and 6,000 aircraft smash into German Army Group Center with overwhelming force. Within 72 hours, the entire German defense collapses. Within 2 weeks, 28 German divisions cease to exist. But Bagration isn't just another Soviet offensive. It's Stalin's masterpiece, perfectly timed to coincide with D-Day, designed to destroy Germany's largest army group and open the road to Berlin. Soviet tank armies are advancing 50 miles per day through terrain the Germans thought was impassable. The Third Belarusian Front, commanded by General Ivan Chernyakhovsky, spearheads the advance with 700,000 men and 1,200 tanks. These aren't just numbers. They represent the most experienced, best-equipped force the Red Army has ever fielded. Veterans of Stalingrad and Kursk, soldiers who have been fighting Germans for 3 years and learning with every battle. At the tip of this spear drives the 5th Guards Tank Army under General Pavel Rotmistrov, elite tank units equipped with the latest T-34-85 medium tanks and massive IS-2 heavy tanks that can destroy any German armor at long range. Their objective: reach the Baltic coast, cut off German Army Group North, and continue the advance toward Berlin. Standing against this avalanche is Army Group Center, already shattered by the first week of Bagration. German divisions that existed on paper had ceased to exist in reality. Supply lines stretched beyond breaking point. Luftwaffe squadrons reduced to a handful of operational aircraft. The Eastern Front was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. This is where Hans-Ulrich Rudel enters history. At 28, he's already the most decorated pilot in the German military with over 1,800 combat missions. He flies the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka, a dive bomber that's been obsolete since 1941 but remains in service because nothing else can deliver precision strikes in close air support. The Stuka is a relic of early war success. Slow, vulnerable, armed with just 2 37mm anti-tank cannons and a few small bombs. Against modern Soviet fighters, it's a flying coffin. Against concentrated anti-aircraft fire, it's suicide. But in the hands of an expert pilot who understands its limitations and exploits its strengths, the Stuka becomes something else entirely. Rudel's squadron, Schlachtgeschwader 2, operates from Kaunas Airfield in Lithuania with just 12 operational aircraft. They face impossible odds: the entire Soviet Air Force, thousands of tanks advancing in multiple columns, and anti-aircraft defenses that have grown deadlier with every month of war. But Rudel has advantages that Soviet commanders don't understand. He knows the terrain intimately after 3 years of combat flights. He understands Soviet tank tactics from countless previous engagements. Most importantly, he has developed precision attack techniques that allow a single Stuka to destroy multiple tanks in a single mission. July 5, 1944. Soviet reconnaissance reports reach Chernyakovsky's headquarters with disturbing news. German resistance is stiffening around Vilnius, the Lithuanian capital. Tank columns that had been advancing without opposition are reporting sustained air attacks from lone aircraft appearing without warning. The reports seem impossible. Single aircraft attacking entire tank columns? Individual pilots engaging multiple targets in one mission? Soviet intelligence assumes the reports are exaggerated by frustrated tank commanders who can't explain their losses to higher headquarters. But the attacks are real, and they're all coming from one man. Rudel has perfected a technique he calls tank hunting, approaching at extremely low altitude to avoid radar detection, identifying the most valuable targets, then executing near-vertical dives that place bombs and cannon fire with surgical precision. Each mission follows the same pattern. Rudel takes off alone in his Stuka, flies at treetop level to the target area, climbs rapidly to attack altitude, then dives at angles that stress his aircraft beyond design limits. At the last possible moment, he releases his weapons and pulls out of the dive so close to the ground that his propeller wash kicks up dust on Soviet tank crews. The psychological effect is as important as the physical damage. Soviet tank crews, accustomed to mass air attacks that can be countered with concentrated anti-aircraft fire, find themselves facing an enemy who appears without warning, strikes with precision, and disappears before defensive fire can be coordinated. July 12, 1944. The day that changes everything begins with Soviet intelligence reports of a massive German counterattack being prepared near Xiaoliai. Tank columns are massing for what appears to be a desperate attempt to break the Soviet encirclement of Army Group North. General Rotmistrov commits his entire tank army reserve, 400 T-34S and IS-2 heavy tanks in the largest concentration of Soviet armor since Kursk. The plan is simple: smash through German defenses, reach the Baltic coast, and cut off 200,000 German soldiers in a pocket that will end organized resistance in the Baltic states. At 0600 hours, the Soviet attack begins with a massive artillery barrage that can be heard 30 miles away. Then, 400 tanks advance in perfect formation across open ground toward German positions. From the air, it looks like an unstoppable metal tide that will sweep away everything in its path. Rudel receives the emergency call at 0630. Soviet tank army attacking in overwhelming strength. All available aircraft requested for immediate close air support. Expected survival time for aircraft operating in that environment: less than 10 minutes due to concentrated anti-aircraft fire. Most pilots would request fighter escort or wait for more favorable conditions. Rudel takes off immediately in his lone Stuka, flying toward the sound of gunfire that grows louder with every mile. What he sees when he arrives over the battlefield defies description. 400 Soviet tanks advancing in 3 massive columns across terrain perfectly suited for armored warfare. No cover for attacking aircraft. Anti-aircraft guns positioned at regular intervals providing overlapping fields of fire. Fighter patrols circling overhead ready to engage any German aircraft that appears. Any rational analysis would conclude that a single dive bomber attacking this force is committing suicide. The math is simple: 1 aircraft against 400 tanks plus fighters plus anti-aircraft guns equals certain destruction. But Rudel has stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about mission accomplishment. His first attack targets the lead elements of the center column. Diving vertically from 12,000 feet, Rudel places his 37 cannon fire into the engine compartment of a T-34, igniting fuel and ammunition in a massive explosion. Before Soviet anti-aircraft gunners can react, he's climbing away at full power for another attack. The second dive targets tank commanders' vehicles, T-34s with radio equipment that coordinate the advance. Two more tanks destroyed with precision cannon fire that penetrates armor at ranges Soviet designers thought were impossible. Tank columns begin losing coordination as command vehicles explode in sequence. Soviet fighter pilots struggle to engage an aircraft that appears suddenly, attacks for 30 seconds, then disappears at extremely low altitude where their faster aircraft can't follow safely. Anti-aircraft gunners find themselves shooting at shadows as Rudel uses terrain features to mask his approach and escape routes. For 4 hours, the pattern continues. Attack, destroy targets, escape, refuel, repeat. By 10:30 hours, Rudel has completed 12 combat missions and destroyed 17 Soviet tanks. The advancing columns are scattered, demoralized, and leaderless. What had been an unstoppable advance has become a confused mass of burning vehicles. But the real breakthrough comes on Rudel's 13th mission of the day. Attacking the reserve column held in the rear, he spots something that makes him forget every principle of tactical aviation. The Soviet Army headquarters, a concentration of command vehicles, radio trucks, and staff cars that represents the brain of the entire offensive. Against every rule of aerial combat, Rudel commits to an attack on the most heavily defended target on the battlefield. Diving through concentrated anti-aircraft fire that fills the sky with steel fragments, he places his remaining bombs directly into the command post, destroying communication equipment and killing most of the staff officers coordinating the attack. The effect is immediate and catastrophic for Soviet forces. Tank columns that had been advancing in coordination suddenly lose all central control. Units begin attacking in different directions. Confusion spreads through radio networks, and the carefully planned offensive disintegrates into chaos. General Rotmistrov, monitoring the battle from his forward command post, watches in disbelief as his tank army falls apart under attack from a single aircraft. Radio reports flood in of destroyed vehicles, confused orders, and units requesting new instructions that no longer exist. By 1400 hours, the Soviet offensive has completely collapsed. Tank columns that had been 48 hours away from reaching the Baltic coast are retreating in disorder. The encirclement of Army Group North fails. The advance toward Berlin stops for crucial weeks that allow German forces to establish new defensive lines. Rudel's final tally for July 12, 1944: 17 confirmed tank kills, multiple vehicle destroys, and the complete disruption of a 400-tank offensive that should have ended German resistance in the Baltic region. All accomplished in 18 combat missions flown by one man in one obsolete aircraft. The strategic implications ripple across the entire Eastern Front. Operation Bagration, which had been advancing ahead of schedule, suddenly faces organized German resistance. Soviet forces that should have been approaching East Prussia are bogged down in fighting for Lithuanian cities they should have bypassed. But Rudel's achievement goes beyond tactical success. He proves that individual skill and determination can overcome seemingly impossible odds. One man with obsolete equipment operating against overwhelming enemy strength, changing the course of military operations through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Soviet post-war analysis of the Sialyi engagement identifies Rudel's intervention as the turning point that saved Army Group North from encirclement. German forces that should have been destroyed in July 1944 survived to fight defensive battles that delay the Soviet advance by critical months. The psychological impact on both sides is enormous. Soviet tank crews develop what intelligence reports call Stuka psychosis, constant scanning of empty skies for an aircraft that might appear without warning. German infantry gains renewed confidence that air support is still possible even when outnumbered 100 to 1. Rudel himself seems almost unaware of what he has accomplished. His mission reports for July 12th read like routine operational summaries: targets engaged, ammunition expended, aircraft status. No mention of single-handedly stopping an army, no recognition that he has just achieved something unprecedented in military aviation. But his superiors understand immediately. Within hours, Rudel receives Germany's highest military decoration, the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. He becomes the only person in German military history to receive the Golden Oak Leaves, a decoration created specifically for his achievements. The Stuka he flew that day becomes a legend in its own right, peppered with anti-aircraft fragments, its engine damaged by overstressing during extreme diving attacks. It somehow continues flying mission after mission. Ground crews call it the aircraft that refuses to die. Word of Rudel's achievement spreads through both armies with the speed of battlefield legend. Soviet commanders begin planning operations specifically to counter single aircraft attacks. German pilots study his tactics, trying to replicate techniques that seem to violate every principle of aerial warfare. But Rudel's methods can't be easily copied because they depend on skills developed through thousands of combat missions. His ability to identify the most valuable targets instantly, his precision in placing weapons under extreme stress, his navigation skills that allow him to find targets and escape routes in unmarked terrain. Most importantly, his psychological makeup allows him to function effectively under conditions that would paralyze normal pilots. Flying alone against overwhelming odds requires a mental state that balances calculated aggression with survival instinct. Too much caution and the mission fails. Too much aggression and the pilot dies accomplishing nothing. The broader lesson of Rudel's achievement transcends military aviation. In an age of mass warfare dominated by huge armies and overwhelming firepower, one individual with specialized skills can still change history. Technology and numbers matter, but expertise and determination matter more. Modern military analysts study the Xiaoliai engagement as an example of how air power can achieve strategic effects through tactical actions. Rudel's 18 missions on July 12th disrupted an entire army's operations, proving that precision strikes can accomplish what mass bombardment cannot. The human cost of Rudel's success was enormous on both sides. Soviet tank crews died in burning vehicles. German infantry died defending positions that should have been overrun. The war continued for months longer than it might have, costing thousands of lives. Heroes create tragedy even when they prevent disaster. Today, Hans-Ulrich Rudel remains the most successful ground attack pilot in aviation history. His 2,530 combat missions destroyed 519 tanks, 700 trucks, 150 artillery pieces, 70 landing craft, 2 cruisers, 1 battleship, and countless other targets. Numbers that seem impossible until you understand the man who achieved them. But his greatest achievement wasn't statistical. It was proving that individual excellence can overcome systemic failure, that one person refusing to accept defeat can change outcomes that seem predetermined, that skill, courage, and determination still matter in an age of mass destruction. The airplane that destroyed an army wasn't special. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka was obsolete when Rudel flew it into combat on July 12, 1944. What made it special was the pilot who refused to believe that one man in one aircraft couldn't make a difference against impossible odds. Hans-Ulrich Rudel and his Stuka, one man, one airplane, one day that stopped an army and changed the course of World War II. The most incredible solo mission in aviation history, flown by a pilot who proved that individual heroism still matters in an age of mass warfare.